All right. Welcome, everyone. Give all of you a moment to join us coming from the waiting room. We're so happy to have you today. Welcome again. My name is Julie Webb, and I'm a Senior Program Associate here at WestEd. And welcome to Session 3 of the Data Leadership Training Series. And in this session today, we're going to cover leadership and culture for effective data use. And as we get started today, I'm doing a little bit of Zoom housekeeping, and we'll go over our agenda as well. So a few housekeeping items specifically to Zoom. We have everyone muted today in the session, but if for some reason you come off mute accidentally, if you could make sure to remute yourself, that would be much appreciated. There's an awful lot of information our presenters are going to share today, and if we can minimize any background noise, that will be really helpful for everyone. So if you could keep your microphone muted unless you're otherwise directed to do so. If you need to do that, you can select the arrow next to the microphone icon to change your audio connection. And today we'll actually be using the chat feature when prompted by your facilitators in order to do some reflection and to share some different ideas that we all have. We're not going to be using the chat feature on Zoom to ask questions of the facilitators that you need answered in the moment. We actually have another strategy to help you with that today, and we're going to share that with you in just a moment. Another thing to note in Zoom today, we do have a couple of breakout rooms scheduled today, and we hope that and encourage you to participate in those along with your colleagues. But we also know some folks like to process information on their own and think about the information that was just presented. So of course, you can feel free to engage to the level that works for you. But we also want to make sure that you rejoin us in the main room once those breakout rooms conclude, because there's a lot more information for us to share with you today once those breakout rooms close. All right. So today we're going to be using a Padlet as a launch pad to access resources and obtain materials and to answer questions for you. So the link to the Padlet for today's session has been dropped into the chat box. And we're going to ask you to please use the Padlet to post questions instead of using the chat feature during the session today that we said a moment ago. So this Padlet will be a great place for us to engage with you and get your questions answered. We're going to be working in the background to answer all of your questions on the Padlet today. And we're actually going to take a look at the Padlet here on the screen in just a moment, knowing that not all of us are familiar with this tool. So this Padlet is organized into different columns from left to right, and there's a scroll bar at the bottom so you can see all the different sections today. So we have that feature being modeled right now. Thank you. We have all of our sections for the presentation, as well as additional resources. Our first column is entitled Meeting Information, and there's different information there that pertains to our session today. Our second column, specifically, if you need any technical support today, there's a Zoom problem or even a Padlet problem or some other thing that's coming up for you that you're having difficulty with, this is a great place for you to engage with presenters or those of us in the background here to support you. So I'm going to model for you today how to do that. So we hover here over the plus sign that's below the heading of each of these columns. And that plus sign, if you click on it, will open a new window that we have here off to the right. And you can type in the subject or the topic of the question or issue that you're having. And then below, there's additional space to even write if you need to. And then once you've done so, the publish button changes color and becomes active. And if you click on that publish button, you can see here the question is posted in that particular column. So you want to make sure that if you're posting a question or answering one of the questions that we post to you, that you're in the correct column that's associated with that section or that particular topic that you're inquiring about. All right. So we'll use that Padlet in the background a little bit today. So we also have some really fabulous presenters for you today. If we could go to that slide, please, so I can introduce them. They will also be introducing themselves, however, during the session today. So with us today, we have Dr. Tacey Rogers, and she's Director of Assessment, Research, and Evaluation for the Solano County Office of Education. We also have Joe Valero, Executive Leadership Coach, Data, Strategy, and Improvement from Fresno County Superintendent of Schools. And we're very pleased to have them sharing their expertise and experience with you today. And as I said, they'll introduce themselves as we move along through the presentation. And this is actually the third of 4 professional learning sessions in the Data Leadership Training Series. You can register for the upcoming session, which should be session 4, through the link that we've just dropped into the chat. That's actually occurring later this week. And while all the sessions focus on the use of assessment data, attendance in each session is not dependent upon the previous session. So they're not cumulative. You can pick and choose the sessions that work for you. So last week, we had session 1, the role of summative data in a data use culture. We also had session 2, putting data in context to make decisions. And we're here together for session 3, leadership and culture for effective data use. And later this week, we'll conclude with session 4, a shared practice panel, which we have some different folks from different parts of the state sharing some of their experience and expertise in their local context. That can be very illustrative for all of us. And the sessions for the Data Leadership Training Series are recorded and they're posted on YouTube. So a link to the 2022-23 training series on YouTube has been included in your resource guide. So feel free to check that out on your own. And we'll be posting and sharing these this year as well. So our agenda for today, beyond our welcome and housekeeping that we're finishing up right now, we will be discussing equity-focused assessment and data use, followed by leadership for effective assessment and data use. We will also be talking about what it means to lead a balanced assessment system, and we'll do an exploration of data in partnership with various educational partners. And we'll have a very brief wrap up at the end of our time today. And we're going to be asking for your participation throughout today's learning in the form of different engagement opportunities, such as polls, participating in chats, and some work and discussion in small breakout rooms. So we hope that you can take full advantage of those opportunities today. And just like teachers with students in classrooms, we want to be clear about our goals for learning. So in this session today, participants will understand the importance of the role of leaders in supporting effective, equitable assessment and data use, what leaders can do to cultivate and encourage a culture of effective data use, and how to explore data in partnership with educational partners. And at the end of the session, our success criteria, you should be able to identify key practices that you can employ in your own context to lead a culture of effective data use. And our first engagement opportunity here today, as folks are still getting settled, we would like you to consider, what do you think you would observe, or what evidence would you see in a culture of effective data use? We're hoping that you can answer that question to the best of your ability by typing your ideas into the chat box. So what would you observe if you were in a culture of effective data use? Randomization. So I'm assuming that means using lots of different opportunities to collect data, making sure that we're not cherry picking our data or participants in that data collection process. I'm seeing lots of collaboration, looking for student growth over time. Another yes for randomization. Good, some student ownership, recognizing that students are part of those educational partners that we talk about. The use of data in PLCs, quantitative and qualitative data, digging deeper into data. Gosh, there's so many things flying through the chat. It's hard to keep up. You all are in the right place, and we're going to have some really great breakout rooms today. I can tell because there's so much good information being shared already. Thank you so much, and thank you for that quick engagement. So I'm going to pass it along to our presenters today to lead us through starting in section 1.
Thank you so much, Julie. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. My name is Dr. Tacey Rogers, and I serve, as Julie mentioned, at Solano County Office of Education. Solano County is about 45 miles northeast of San Francisco in Northern California. We have 6 school districts, 12 charter organizations in our county. So I'm very honored to be here with you all. I was like Julie, trying to keep up with this chat and the details that you all are describing around what constitutes a culture of data use. So what's the evidence that we would see? You all got me excited. Multiple forms of data, multiple measures, raw data. I see here thinking about the disaggregation of data, right? It's only when you truly see the data for itself, not those standardized reports, but the actual data. I got really excited seeing all of the evidence that you all would be looking for in your practice of a culture for data use. In this section, we are going to talk about how we can, as leaders, ensure that we are using our data effectively and really focusing on what it means to have equity in our practice and how we look for evidence of equity in our data assessment and data use. So let's start with this quote on the next slide. I'm going to read it for us. It says, "Equity isn't a destination, but an unwavering commitment to a journey. It can be easy to focus on where we hope to land and lose sight of the deliberate daily actions that constitute the process." So when you see that quote, I wonder if you can react in the chat. What words stand out to you? What resonates? What phrases in that quote stand out to you? Like, react to the quote. What's your reflection when you hear that? I'll read it once more for us while we are thinking about it. Equity isn't a destination, but an unwavering commitment to a journey. It can be easy to focus on where we hope to land and lose sight of the deliberate daily actions that constitute the process. What stands out to you? I'm looking at what's coming through in the chat. We have unwavering commitment as really resonating with some of us on the line, the journey, losing sight of. Deliberate daily actions is something else that's being called out in the chat. The word commitment, again, deliberate is coming up over and over. Emphasis on the journey. Unwavering commitment is being called out in the chat. Deliberate daily actions. Journey keeps coming up as something that's resonating with us. Process, yes, focusing on the footsteps. Consistency. Oh, this is so great. Deliberate daily actions leading to intentionality. Daily actions. Thank you all so much. Thank you all so much. This quote comes from the text Street Data. Street Data, it's an article, A Next Generation Model for Equity, Pedagogy, and School Transformation, published by Corin. Those of you who are interested. And I really value what you all are uplifting, especially around the deliberate nature of our journey together in data analysis. Thank you for reacting to this quote with us. On the next slide, we'll talk about an equity mindset. Some of you might have been present with us in session 2, where we talked a little bit about what it means to have an equity mindset. And it's important to have this mindset as we approach our use of data and we're leading our teams through data analysis. This specific way of thinking allows us to be very explicit in our decision making around highlighting equity. And we are highlighting equity in our conversations about the data itself and how we plan on using that data. An equity mindset allows us, those of us who are working with student data, to consider our learners as individuals beyond the numbers, right? And it supports our challenge of any beliefs that might exist in our system and helps us identify barriers that could be present as we're observing student learning and aiming to identify any inequities. Implicit bias refers to any attitudes or stereotypes that might affect our understanding. And those implicit bias could also affect our actions. It could affect decisions across our system, and they are done so in an unconscious manner. So sometimes we're not able to identify the why, but we are simply identifying that the biases exist. An equity mindset requires us to be actively interrogating our systems, and we're aiming to uncover any implicit biases that might be present. And so when we think about using data to support equity, on the next slide, we think about having a cultural foundation of data use. And that cultural foundation of data use, it has to be something that's modeled, it has to be something expected and reinforced. And so we're really thinking about what processes, what supports do we have that are allowing us to reinforce the requirement of prioritizing equity in our practice. Across our organizations or across our systems, we're charged with ensuring that there's a common commitment and a shared responsibility for equitable outcomes for our students. And this is done oftentimes through using the data and allowing the data to really drive our conversations that allow us to address the inequities, and we address them directly. And we focus on disaggregating the data, and we saw that in the chat moments ago, to understand the experiences of our students across our system. We really aim to think about how we are facilitating our teams in data analysis and wanting to use the data to support the learning environment, and not just consider what are the gains, what are the deficits, what has changed since last year from an accountability perspective, but really use the data to support us in challenging the beliefs, challenging the investigation of any implicit biases, and helping us not simply uncover existing beliefs, but aiming to learn more about our systems and why we're getting the outcomes that we're getting. And this foundation for using data to support equity also allows us to authentically engage our educational partners as a part of the process as well. And you likely heard about that in session 2 for those of you who were able to listen in. And if you weren't, that's okay, because the recording will be sent out later on. On the next slide, we focus on this reminder around the engagement of educational partners, and that engagement process on the next slide is essential to, oh, we're on the right side, excuse me, is essential to supporting equity in our practices and our policies around assessment and data use. And when we handle our engagement appropriately, then those conversations create transparency about our data and our student outcomes. And when that transparency is created, that's when authentic engagement is truly prioritized, because there's nothing hidden, there's no wondering, everything's on the table, we're discussing it as a community. And that openness in the discussion increases the level of transparency, and therefore deeply engages our educational partners. It's essential to have authentic engagement in our data analysis process, because that is how we know that our system, our process is focusing on this equity mindset that we're describing. And authentic engagement occurs when the educational partners are provided with accurate data, so in a timely manner, most recent data, and they're able to not only engage with us in one time, one moment, one instance in time, but it's the conversations are continuing throughout the school year as appropriate. So speaking of continuing, you all might be familiar with the concept on the next slide of continuous improvement. And systems of continuous improvement are dependent upon effective data use. And if you attended session 2, you might recall that we talked a lot about the 5 R's process. And the 5 R's data analysis protocol stands for research is the first R, followed by recall, reflect, respond, and review. And using the protocol allows us to ground our efforts in continuous improvement to ensure that our team is understanding the whole system and the whole system's performance on producing our student outcomes, the design of that performance, how that performance is operating, and it makes sure we don't forego any essential gaps in our data review. continuous improvement relies on this cycle of inquiry. So we're always investigating, always looking at our practice, always measuring who's at the table, who's not, who we're missing. And we're asking ourselves these same questions each year in our data analysis process. It allows us to focus on root cause analysis, root cause identification, that the organization, the school, the district in itself, the LEA in itself, focus on the outcomes that are being produced, and again allows us to look at those outcomes at the different levels across our system. So on the next slide, we think about in continuous improvement the data that is being used to understand our practice, the why behind the results we're getting, what changes can be made to shift those results, and the impacts that those changes will have on our partners, whether that is students directly, whether that is staff across our school sites, or whether that is community members who are closely connected to our students being served. On the next slide, we really think about shifting our mindset and how we articulate to our teammates, our staff, those who are in the table with us, engaging with this data, shifting from compliance, right, where we're checking off boxes, and thinking more about this continuous improvement cycle in our culture of data use. And we know firsthand, us in this room, that there are many tasks connected with compliance, right? And those tasks we likely won't be able to eliminate. However, continuous improvement allows us to also acknowledge that any insights that exist as we're completing our compliance related tasks, we're leaving space for insight that might emerge as we're engaging in equity-based practices. If the right people are at the table and our educational partner engagement is authentic, then the right questions will be asked, and we will foster an environment that allows us to engage meaningfully, and that is beyond compliance, right? We will be thinking deeper about our outcomes and the results that are producing those. And one example that we might consider together as we are all working to refine our annual practices related to assessment data analysis is thinking about ways we can leverage. There's some protected time that exists in our systems related to the production of our local control accountability plans, related to us producing our school accountability report cards. Those times of engagement are truly protected. And rather than building on another meeting or another task or another to-do, think about how we leverage that existing time to ensure that our data analysis is focused on equity and that we're engaging with our partners authentically. So we have a breakout, and you heard Julie mention that we are wanting to engage in a deeper way with these sessions this year. And feel free, you can join the breakout room. You can leave if you need to. If you prefer to process the material individually, that's fine. I hope you have the Padlet open because all of our materials are posted on the Padlet. So if you're like me, you can download things during this time and review and see what's coming up next. But those of you who are willing and able, we want to ask you to go into breakout rooms and think about this question that's here on the slide. How can you keep an equity focus and support equally high outcomes for all students through annual activities and conversations that use assessment data? So you're really wanting to do some deep reflection and think about the current structures that you have in place. We talked about LCAP production. We talked about SARC production. What are some of those moments that can allow you with your team to keep an equity focus and equally support student outcomes through those annual activities that use assessment data? What does that look like for you? What's circling around in your brain at this time related to this equity focus? So we're going to open up the breakout rooms and we'll see you back here in a few minutes. Thank you for those of you who were able to engage. I'm now going to turn it over to my colleague, Joe, who's going to lead us through the next section.
All right. Thank you, Tacey. You know, you got that song in my head, Welcome Back, Cotter, when I heard you say, welcome back, welcome back, welcome back. All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Joe Valera from the Office of the Fresno County Superintendent of Schools. We're really happy to be here today with everybody. So we're going to pivot here. We're going to start looking at leadership for effective assessment and data use. We can go to the next slide, please. So let's start off with the definition of culture. A definition of a culture of data use. And so, once again, we want to thank everybody for participating in the breakout rooms, breakout activities. Sharing is caring, a great way to go over and hear different ideas and different thoughts. Um, let's start off with the definition. And so, a strong data culture results when an organization believes in continuous improvement, just like Tacey was talking about earlier, in continuous improvement, and regularly puts that belief into practice. Schools and districts that have strong data cultures emphasize collaboration as a keystone for success, and they empower teachers and administrators to make decisions in which they will be held accountable. And that's from Ronca, Geyer, and Marcinak in 2010. And so, thinking about that quote, how does your vision for a culture of data use match up with the definition given here? A culture of data use means that an organizational systems and structures are in place to ensure this work is ongoing, supports continuous enrollment. Oh my gosh, talking about accountability, right? Supports continuous improvement, and happens without oversight. Once again, it's a culture. A culture doesn't need oversight. It's just something that happens. It's something that's really a routine. It's a routine that's happening. A leader's role in assessment and data use policies and practices should be guided by and directly support a shared vision of teaching and learning. Staff must be able to collaboratively construct community agreements to guide conversations and decisions around data use and be provided with opportunities to expand their knowledge around data literacy. An emphasis on coherence within the establishment of a culture of continuous improvement will help the educational community to understand how data will help to move the school's or site's vision forward. And we're going to get a little deeper into that here in the very next slide. In an organization where there's an established culture of data use, once again, culture, when we think culture, think of a routine. It's something that's just happening over and over, really, without needing to go over and push it forward. But in a culture of data use of data happens across the organization in practical ways as part of everyday business. This is supported by the intentional creation of equitable structures and practices around data use and embedding data literacy skills within and across systems. Data use practices are seen as one of the tools implemented to complete the daily work of teaching and learning. And there is a distinction between compliance-driven data use and inquiry-based data use. I mean, we don't want to go over and come in heavy-handed with this. This distinction is important to create the safe environment necessary for effective use of data. Remember, data should be making us ask more and more questions, and the safer the environment is, the more questions we're more likely to ask. Teams will also help build understanding and meaning around data. It is not analyzed by one individual in a vacuum, and value is placed on the professional judgments of those across multiple levels of the educational system, including the knowledge that teachers bring to the conversation. In addition, there's a culture of continuous improvement around building the staff's own knowledge of data literacy and the use to inform practice and policy. It is important to attend to all 5 of these elements simultaneously to avoid imbalances across the educational system. Sounds very much like Star Wars, right? You want to have balance in your force within your system. So the first one, ensuring access to data. That's a big one. That's a really big one. Data is accessed, coordinated, filtered, and prepared in ways that allow educators to quickly and efficiently analyze and interpret data to answer key questions and address important teaching and learning issues. Is it accessible to them? Is it within a couple of clicks? Is it something that's produced for them to go over and help them with any questions they might have? Making meaning from data. Protected time is provided to allow users of data collectively to make sense of the data and gives them time to explore. how to move from data to evidence that will inform instruction. This might look, just depending on your local context. We've seen some organizations where they have an early release. It's an established time, Wednesday afternoons or Thursday afternoons, or maybe it's students coming late to school, but there's a protected time where people have the opportunity to go over and look through data, not just in silos that was mentioned previous slide, but collectively together to ask those questions. Clarifying the expectations for data use. There are clear expectations about how to use data, and these expectations change over time as the skills and knowledge of practitioners increases. Building knowledge and skills to use data, professional learning around data use, assessment literacy, and using data to inform instruction is differentiated and made available for staff. It is integrated into daily practices and supports teachers in building content knowledge. Having that PL around, here's the data. This is how we might use it, going over and supporting, coming alongside, not just going over, having data sets, dropping it in people's laps and say, here you go, figure it out, let's go over, let's do something about it. It's really that thoughtful process, making sure that we're coming alongside and supporting. Leading a culture of data use. Leadership supports and encourages a culture of data use and develops structures that include time and resources to conduct ongoing data dialogue and feedback that will support users to act on new knowledge, not just going over and going through the motions, not just going through the steps and the processes. Once again, not about compliance, but actually going over and being thoughtful with the data analysis and making change based on it. Leaders' knowledge and use of data is central to helping educators interact around issues that will lead to improved learning outcomes. Are there any surprises in this framework? If so, what stands out that is surprising? And then which ideas in this framework are familiar? We now ask to reflect on the 5 elements of culture of data use and consider connecting it to your system, which are areas of strength. Once again, thinking back to your system, thinking back to your system, which are areas of strength and which ones need work. We've dropped a link to Mentimeter. That's a polling tool in the chat box. Please navigate to Mentimeter and order the 5 elements from strongest to weakest in your context. So once again, please navigate to Mentimeter and then order the 5 elements from strongest to weakest in your context and in your organization. So I see it's been dropped in the chat right now. Go on ahead, feel free, click on it, and you're going to order them strongest to weakest in your context. Oh, we're seeing results come in already. I see Tacey. Feel free, Tacey, if you like as well. Feel free to come off mute. So it looks like we're feeling our strongest is ensuring access to data. That's really critical. Do we even have that access? Because we really can't talk about much unless we have access to it. Oh, and I'm seeing, this is almost like a horse race now. I'm seeing changes between second and third. So making meaning, love it. Building knowledge and skills to use data. It's really one of those. We need that additional support. We need that. How might we massage and support users with going over and knowing how to use data? It's not just one of those things where you're born with it. It's one of those we learn it over time. Mm-hmm. Clarifying expectations for data use. The clearer we are, clear is kind. Clear is kind. Leading a culture of data use. I don't see too. Oh no, I do see some changes happening now. Looks like clarifying might end up once again. It's like a horse race. We can all take bets. See who's going to come up in the end.
Wow.
But ensuring access to data, that is just absolutely solid. And we've been pretty consistent too with also the leading of a culture of data use. That is a real big challenge. It is that leading of how do we ensure that we're not once again making it about accountability, but making it about us going in, having really the feeling safe to go over and just really ask those challenging questions, to go over and continue digging deeper. So love it. If you haven't had a chance, please go on ahead. Feel free to go over and rate your strengths, strongest to area that you really feel is weak and you want to go over and improve it over time.
You know what I'm thinking about, Joe? I would love to bring this question to my colleagues because I wonder about how I would rank our team and then how they might rank rank us, right? And like just a discussion on our based on their different positions in the organization and what we see. And I might say, you have all the access you need. And they might say, no, I don't. I wonder.
That is a great point, huh? What if we did take this and then you're a site leader, if it's everybody within the site, if you're a district leader, what does that look like from individual sites? Oh, I love that. That is a great thought, Tayson. Always stealing ideas. I love stealing ideas from you. Uh, all right. Thank you, everybody, for going over and adding your thoughts to the Mentimeter. And we're going to switch over to data literacy. And so we're gonna get a little deeper into some data literacy definitions. And I'm really just you're going to see me actually look to the right because I'm going to read definitions just directly off the slide just to start us off. So when we're talking about data literacy definitions, it's a process that integrates the analysis of educational data to support decisions intended to improve teaching and learning at the school and classroom levels. It's also an understanding of the properties of data and how you can use them to inform practice. There's a really big key word in there. The word is use. Use. It's almost like assessments, right? Difference between we can give an assessment or we can use an assessment. When you use an assessment, you're using the data. You're using the information. We're taking it to make decisions for us. It's imperative that staff across all levels of the educational system are operating from the same definition of data literacy. Do we all have the same understanding? And it's part of the role of leadership to continue to offer professional development to support this learning. It is helpful for teams to be operating from the same place of understanding when engaging in conversations. Do we all understand it the same way? Do we all have the same meaning? And with that, I'm going to turn this over to my colleague, Casey.
Thank you so much, Joe. I really value those 5 elements and ranking them. And the fact that our colleagues on this line ranked the access first is clearly we're starting with the foundation. We can't do anything if our teams can't access the data they need to make their decisions and to do their analysis and continuously improve. And so when we think about the assessments that we give in our systems from year to year and wanting to build on what you've described, Joel, around this culture of data use and really asking ourselves why we use each data set and how we use it. We also examine the quality of the assessments that our systems have chosen. And we want to make sure that the data conversations that we have around those assessment outcomes are effective, that it's meaningful, it's not wasting our colleagues' time, right? We give them access. And then I think you all also ranked pretty high, ensuring that colleagues know how to use the data, what the expectations are. That's all a part of continuous improvement. And we're constantly evaluating ourselves and our teams and our organizations, like our entire system, on which assessments have we chosen, why are we using them, for what purpose. We are often thinking about are our staff using the assessment data for its intended purpose? Are we having to manipulate it? Are we having to create things on our own? Like always asking and thinking about what our assessment landscape looks like. And so on the next slide, when we think about a balanced assessment system, we also include having this full understanding, like this full bird's eye view, this full picture of the assessment landscape at our in our organization. And to gain this clear perspective, we might have to use tools such as an assessment audit. And an assessment audit helps us really ask ourselves those questions around what assessments are we using, why, for what purpose, who's accessing them, when. And it provides our teams with insights into the type of assessments, the number of them, how our colleagues, our teachers in our system are looking at the data? Do they understand the purpose? Remember, we were talking about, I know my answer to the ranking question, but how does my colleague respond to the data? How do they articulate its purpose, right? Also including their perception in the evaluation. And thinking about which assessments are our teachers truly engaging with and which are they perceiving as not as useful as we would imagine, right? It's important that we uncover some of that. And if we do an assessment evaluation, the purpose is to understand the value and possibly if there are instances where there's a lack of value in the assessments. So we can identify the why and what and the what's causing it, what's causing this perception. Is it truly because the data's not useful? Or is it the understanding that's perhaps lacking the value? So per usual, we have handouts for you. And those of you who have the Padlet open, the link to our materials for this session are included on the Padlet, specifically handout 3.1. And I must say, I'm a very digital person. I like to have all my materials digitally. So when I print something, it's a good sign. And let me tell you, I printed handout 3.1 because I needed to have this in my hands. This handout is for you and it can support your assessment audit journey. Those of you who have saved the materials, please open up and take a look at handout 3.1. There's two ways that you can start to approach your assessment audit. And I'm looking down at the handout. Those of you who have it open on your screen, you can organize your assessment audit one by content area. So focused on the core contents perhaps is a way to start. And you will complete the template that is in handout 3.1 by answering some questions related to the purpose of the assessment, the frequency, identifying which students take the assessment, identifying who uses that data and for what purpose. You can organize it by content area, or you can organize it by grade level or grade span. So that's another option for you to consider. And so you look at the first column, and now those are the probing questions that you can answer. And you might consider getting staff across your system involved with completing the assessment audit. I think of teachers on special assignment. I think of department chairs. I think of teacher leaders. How might they be included in identifying all of the assessments that are present across a particular content area, grade level or grade span? I might even add a row based on what Joe described around understanding the assessments and their uses. I might add who has access to the assessment data. And I'm adding that only because you all ranked access as number one in thinking about your culture of data use. So I might add that question and have your colleagues across the system engage with you in identifying. If in my head, all of my teacher colleagues have access and we get out in the field and they actually tell us they've never seen it, right? Like that would be something worth investigating. Once you complete the assessment audit and have it in a complete format, it could be useful to share with new staff who might join your system. I think about new principals joining a school site, giving them kind of a lay of the land. Here's what exists at this school site. I think about new directors or new assistant directors. Any level in your system might find a completed assessment audit as being helpful. On the next slide, when you think about policies and practices related to your assessment data, those policies and practices should guide the support that's connected to how the assessments really lift up teaching and learning. And you also can investigate the completed audit and the completed assessment audit and make sure it's aligning with your LEA's mission, aligning with your value statement, aligning with your LCAP, with your SARC. If there's items on the assessment audit that are counter to what your LEA is really prioritizing, then that's an opportunity to continuously improve. I do want to turn it back over to you, Joe, because on the next slide, we have this case study, this example of Mendota Unified. And I believe Mendota is one of the districts that your team supports. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. Funny thing, I was just out there, I think last week, towards the end of the week, And they are a great example in a positive way. Mendota is a really wonderful example, a thoughtful, comprehensive assessment program. And so really when we're thinking about Mendota, they began with a guiding question really just across their whole staff. And it's how do we ensure intentional and strategic action using student assessment data? Once again, keyword using data, using it to make decisions, using it to reflect, using it to go over and look at just that word is such a powerful word. And whenever we're looking at data or using data, or there it is again, right? There's the word of the day, using. Are we using the word using for lack of a better term right now? But they got into the principles. And so it was presented to the principals. Principals were responsible for attending to their action plans. And so here's the interesting thing. They were originally going to call them improvement action plans, but the connotation was too negative. So they're really referred to as their action plans. And that's something that they were working on last week as well with the data. So the goal is for schools to work towards systemic action as opposed to focusing on pockets of excellence, helping to support a continuous improvement mindset. This was important to them to view student data in context to assign meaning. The questions asked during data analysis included, what is the data telling us? What does the district need? Really important. What does the district need versus the school need versus grade level needs? And then getting even more granular to the teachers. So what do teachers need? They might not need what we're trying to go over and implement necessarily district-wide. It was a need-by-need basis based on data. Who are the specific groups of students that are impacted? And then really importantly, now what? Where do we go from here? Based on data. The action plans that drive the work for Mendota Unified were intentional and strategic. They're still doing it, literally working on it last week. Need and focus. Once again, what is the data telling us? In their words, instructional change. What adult action will take place to address the need or sustain the effective practices? And then getting to the next steps, what systems, processes, and procedures are needed to ensure the instructional change is effectively implemented? Don't just come up with a plan. How are we going to do it? And how are we going to ensure that it's going to take place? Whether it's walkthroughs, whether it's checking in, and whatever it is. It's not just coming up with the plan, it's the execution of the plan and that monitoring of the plan. And then the expected outcome. How will we monitor the effectiveness of the instructional change? It's important that all individuals in the system view the action planning as part of a continuous improvement process. And so really, when you think about it, these are just cycles that just continue on. They never stop and they never break. It's just a cycle that just keeps cycling throughout the years. And that's exactly what was happening last week. It's cycling. It's just starting the new cycle all over, reflecting, but also looking forward. So Mendota, once again, great example. Yes, Tacey, please.
Thank you for sharing that, Jill. And I'm so encouraged to know that they were just talking to you about this just last week, because that supports this continuous review, right? Even though they've made some steps forward. Also thinking of knowing that they are thinking about how to improve, right? And so they might be steps ahead of, I think, of our agency. I think about the school districts in our county that we support. However, the fact that they're refining is encouraging. Like, we're all refining this together. I think about the assessment audit that we have been talking about with handout 3.1, and another exercise in that process is including alignment to the standards. And so thinking about which assessments are measuring which standard components, so that we can that can support us in analyzing what you said, Joe, like what is truly needed, like what is the measurement that we're looking for each of these assessments that we're administering. And ideally, assessments are reflecting the content that students are engaging in, and the standards should be fairly relevant as a measurement on the assessment that we've chosen. And so again, you might think about customizing handout 3.1. We talked about adding who has access to the data. You might add the questions that Joe called out that Mendota is considering. How do you use the data? Some language around that. You might add which standards are being measured by each assessment that makes it to your assessment audit document. There are several resources that the California Department of Education has provided us as a part of our statewide assessment suite, including materials or standards. Let me start again. There's several resources that we have access to that support aligned assessments. So we are familiar with our summative assessments, but we also have our interim assessments for ELA and math, and we have our California science test, as well as the interim assessments related there. The interim assessments give us benchmark level details that can be administered in a non-standardized way that support our formative assessment administration process, and that directly aligns to the day-to-day instruction that's happening. What our teams can do is backwards map from the summative assessments to the interim assessments to help support the knowledge and skills, and our colleagues in the classroom who are facilitating the learning, their awareness also of the students' demonstration of those knowledge and skills. So with the interim assessments, we also can make use of the assessment blocks for mathematics and ELA, as well as for the science test, to allow us to gain more immediate feedback on student knowledge and skills. So there are several trainings that exist related to the interim assessments for both ELA and math, as well as the science test. And if you consider exploring the additional training opportunities tab, that link is on our Padlet. You can sign up for more trainings that might be more feasible for you to attend, especially as some of them are scheduled towards the end of the summer, just before things get extremely busy. Another resource, this is what I was jumping ahead to because I was getting excited about sharing the Smarter Content Explorer. It's on the next slide. It's another resource that supports the investigation of standards for ELA and mathematics. So when you're thinking about your assessment audit, if the assessment itself is not very clearly translating which standards are being measured, you can use the Smarter Content Explorer to help you make that connection. And the tools support teachers with understanding the claims, the targets, the standards that are administered by Smarter Balance assessments. And that could be used in your backwards mapping as you're measuring your total assessment landscape in your system. The good thing about Smarter Content Explorer is that you can filter by grade level, you can filter by subject, and you can see all of the standards that are being measured by our summative assessments, our interim assessments, and you can explore them in greater depth. The link to Smarter Content Explorer is also on the Padlet. The science test item specifications is a tool that supports the investigation of the science standard, and that link is also in the resource guide for you to use as well. So, what are some strategies? We've talked about several. We've talked about the question making that Joe talked us through with Mendota, how they're doing their own LEA self-assessment. We talked about the assessment audit. We talked about doing the standards measurement and backwards mapping from the summative through all the assessments you have access to in your system. Other than those, what strategies might exist or do you have currently at place in your system, or those that you're thinking about to help you monitor the alignment of curriculum, instruction, and assessment to grade level standards? So if you can engage in the chat has been open for you. What strategies do you have or are you thinking about to help you and your teams monitor the alignment with curriculum, instruction, and assessment to grade level standards? We'd love to see what ideas you have currently on this. And I'm looking at the chat. We have common formative assessments school-wide. Believe it or not, that is a huge detail. And there are some systems who don't quite have that. So the fact that you all have it, that is great. Thank you for sharing. Oh, using the student information system to monitor ELD students. That's a great strategy. And keep dropping them in the chat and we'll keep looking here. Joe, I'm going to turn it over to you to take us through this next section. And I'm going to keep looking at the chat to see what exists out there with our colleagues.
Perfect. All right. Thank you, Tacey. And so our next section, if we can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. We're going to get into some exploration of data in partnership with educational partners. Educational partners can refer to any person or group of people who have vested interest in student data. Partners can include teachers and other school or LEA level staff, school boards, parent guardians, community members, and others. When considering when and how to engage with educational partners, your messages and intent need to be tailored to that particular audience. Consider their levels of expertise and comfort in discussion of data, what information they need, and how best to communicate that information. Moving to community agreements. So community agreements are an important help in establishing a safe environment to explore and use data. Keyword, use. Leaders should help establish community agreements that support their staff's ability to engage in inquiry around student data. We're using the term community agreements here, but you may be more familiar with the term norms. Because norms are not rules, we will instead be using the term community agreements. Community agreements are effective when a team creates them collaboratively and when their meaning is clear to all. The exercise of creating these agreements together can help to strengthen a team and improve how it operates. For these agreements to be useful, they should be memorable, and there should be no more than 5 to 7. It is helpful to phrase them in positive terms as well. For example, instead of "don't interrupt," the community agreement could be that members will listen to understand. Even the way we read it, right? There are 2 different types of community agreements, procedural and behavioral. Procedural community agreements describe some of the technical agreements between team members. For example, this could be something like agendas will be sent out 2 days prior to the meeting for team members to review. Behavioral community agreements describe the ways that interpersonal interactions will be conducted. An example of this type of agreement could be participants will not talk over one another. Teams can also benefit from regular revisions of community agreements as the year progresses. Once again, thinking about kind of like that continuous improvement. These agreements are often thought of only as being applicable in formal meetings, but they can apply anytime that people interact with each other. Educational partners will need to coalesce around a particular issue to meaningfully engage with data for the purposes of enacting a change. The leader should focus on the inclusion of multiple partners who come from differing and unique roles and who bring new perspectives to the issue or problem through their commonality of need, purpose, and/or action. As individuals with differing backgrounds and experiences share and think together, all benefit by observing that what one might not otherwise observe. Very similar to empathy interviews, hearing it from other levels, even the student level. Thinking about, once again, thinking about empathy interviews, thinking about others' perspectives. Ooh, the exciting resources here. Really excited actually about the SSRs. Sorry to nerd out with everybody, I apologize. But the student score reports, or SSRs, if you haven't had a chance to look at them this year or haven't had a chance to see what they look like, please highly encourage you to go over, get into them because they're really valuable. Student score reports, or SSRs, have been redesigned for the 23-24 school year. Redesigned SSRs are available for ELA, mathematics, and the CAASPP, California Alternate Assessments, or CAAs, for ELA, mathematics, and science. Summative English Language Proficiency Assessments for California, or ELPAC, Summative Alternate ELPAC, and the California Spanish Assessment, or CSA. The goal of the redesign was to improve the reporting of the test results provided to students, parents, and guardians, and include actionable information. Once again, being able to do something with the data. The key changes focus on improvements, including combining ELA, mathematics, and science into one PDF SSR. They're not getting one SSR for ELA, one SSR for math, and one SSR for science if they're in one of the science testing grade levels. Now everything is all combined into one. Big one, the addition of the writing extended response data. That over the last couple of years, people have been going nuts for. People are really excited about that granular information, the granular data that they're able to see with the WER scores. Yes, they live in SIRS. It gives you SIRS does a great job of going over and giving us the percentages of students in each level. But the SSRs, these SSRs right here actually give you the student by student information with what genre they were assigned, how did they perform in the evidence and evidence and elaboration, organization and purpose and conventions. You could see that individually for the students. And how powerful is that to have the conversations with the parents, what this means, bringing them into the mix as well in those conversations. Lexile and quantile measures reported on the SSRs. That is really powerful too. You have a parent, they have the information now. They can go to their local library. They have the actual Lexile measure, the reading level for their children. They can be thoughtful with going over and choosing books that the student is able to read over the summer. The revised ELA and mathematic composite claims, they are inside of those. Score comparison data. There's just so much information. There are two resources that can be helpful for you when communicating the student results. Our colleagues at the California Department of Education have created a document about key messages for the new SSRs. The test results for California Assessment's website, or TRCA, provides aggregate data for school, district, and state results. Links to both of the key messages document and the test results for California Assessment's webpage are included in your resource guide. Continuing with parent-guardian SSR communication, there are three options for accessing and providing student score reports to parents and guardians. Depending upon an LEA's unique factor, one of the following options may be preferable over another, or an LEA may want to consider a combined approach to providing SSRs to parents and guardians. This was literally my conversation earlier today with a colleague we work with locally. We can access electronic SSRs using a locally provided parent or student portal. In this case, the local student information system already had the plug. They automatically just pushed in, parents had access to it. We can also download SSRs, or student score reports, from the Test Operations Management System, or TOMS, and make them available electronically via a secure local method. Or you can download SSRs to TOMS, print, and make them available locally. Once again, if whatever your local context is, it's not a one-size-fits-all. There are going to be different needs based on local context. SSR cover letter templates are also available for LEA staff to customize and send to parents and guardians, along with the child's student score report. SSR cover letter templates are available for CAASPP, the CAAs, and the CSA in English, Spanish, Standard Chinese, Traditional Chinese, Filipino, Vietnamese, Korean, Arabic, and Russian. These letters are an optional resource and are not required to be sent with the SSR. A link to the cover letter templates webpage has been placed in your resource guide. Once again, a lot of resources being shared here today that we'll have some time here to peruse in a few minutes. Data displays can be constructed to visually represent a particular issue. They provide a way to communicate data to audiences visually, but it is important to remember that the presentation of data displays is not an endpoint to a data discussion. Really, it should be going over and generating more questions and making us ask, where do we need to go? Almost like a choose your own adventure. A data display should address a specific audience for a specific purpose. It's a way to communicate data that is important to educational partners, and space should be held for additional information. Participants should consider what could be actionable and next steps. Let's talk about some different ways to display your data. Different data displays can be used to communicate and amplify information. Example, you can use a bar chart to show comparison. You might want to use a bar chart to show the differences in student learning outcomes across schools. A line chart. A line chart you can use to compare changes over time. A line chart could share changes in student learning outcomes over time. Depending on what you're trying to visualize and what you want to visualize, you're going to use different charts. So this information right here was adapted from drstephanieevergreen.com. For those of us that haven't had a chance to be in any of her trainings, she does a wonderful job of simplifying the data, making it to where, how might we go over and visualize this? Continuing with different ways to display data. Different data displays can be used to communicate and amplify information. For example, when we look on the left side of the screen, we see a scatter plot. Scatter plots you can use to show how one thing is impacted by another. A scatter plot could be used to show the relationship between time spent learning in person and summative assessment results. That's one example. You can also use a pie chart. A pie chart you can use to compare parts of a whole. You can use a pie chart to display a breakdown of how a particular student demographic performed on a particular claim, above, at or near, or below standard in a particular grade level. What is the biggest thing though? Just don't use a 3D chart. Then we struggle going over and trying to make sense of what we're seeing. If we can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. We're going to talk about interpretation of data. When sharing assessment data with educational partners, make sure that the data can be interpreted easily to foster an engaging conversation. All educational partners should be brought into the discussion, including students and families. Make sure to ask them for their interpretation of the data rather than telling them what the data shows. Smarter Balanced has created interpretation guides for English language arts and mathematics that can be used to help you interpret and communicate results to educational partners. These guides have been linked into your resource guide and on the Padlet. And this is one that I think I got really excited about this one, just like Tacey got excited about the other resource that was shared earlier, the the assessment audit. There is a data display checklist, and it's your handout 3.2. That can be used to ensure that your data display is clear, understandable, and effective. The checklist has been adapted from data visualization expert Dr. Stephanie Evergreen's data visualization checklist. It is available for you as a resource to use when considering how to craft a story around your data and tailor it for a specific audience and a particular purpose. You can use the checklist to support our upcoming activity. And so we're going to pivot a little bit right here. We're actually running out of time right here, so we're not going to go into a breakout room. So really, we're going to go over and utilize the chat for this part of it. So thinking about your local context, think about your local context. How can you support transparency and engagement in communicating data with educational partners? And I see that the chat was just opened up. Thank you. Once again, the question is, how can you support transparency and engagement in communicating data with educational partners? So go ahead and think about your response right now, and then we'll place those into the chat. You'll place your responses into the chat. How can you support transparency and engagement in communicating data with educational partners? I know we're thinking right now. There we go. Yeah, sharing results at board meetings and going back once again to those conversations earlier of thinking about that audience. Our board members might get a different data set than, let's say, our site leaders or teachers. Oh, and now they're really starting to come in, making it easy to understand. I love that. Sometimes just because we can make something and add a lot of information in doesn't mean we should. It goes back to that Jurassic Park, right? We were so busy thinking about whether we could, we didn't think about whether we should. So how might we go over and make it simplify during school site council meetings? Sharing different data sets for each board meeting, results with site council, ELACs, DLACs. I see a lot of educational partner opportunities right there. Sharing data with students. Yes, love that. One of the most important groups right there, the students. How are we sharing that information with students? How are we making it understandable for them? I love it. Creating opportunities to help parents and families understand student score reports during in-person info sessions. Love it. Yes, bringing up samples. Put a sample one up there. Parents could probably go over, pull it up within the parent portal and view that information right in front. Helping students set goals. Yes. Growth plans based on their data, building around their student, their own individual needs. I'm scrolling back up because there was a lot that came through when it initially came out. I don't know if you see anything that's going over and popping out to you, Tacey.
Oh, I really love the reference to citing published data so that your audience can find that same data source. And I value the credibility that that builds. Like, we're not making this up. This is real data. Like, it's on the web, you know? I value having just a reference point. And sometimes here in our office, we call it the breadcrumbs. Like, can our audience retrace our steps and get the same outcomes that we're describing in our presentation? I really value that point.
That's a great point. Yes, because and especially when we're thinking about LCAPs or SARCs or anything where there's going to be data, it should be easily traced back. Love that. That's a great point. Community and educational partners, data MOUs, uh, data conferences with students and have goals. We're seeing a lot of people talking about bringing students into this process. Yeah, breadcrumbs, right? I love that. I agree, Stephanie. The idea of breadcrumbs. Can we go over and can we track the data back to where it came from? That way it's not just a one and done either, or it's not just something that is given. It's one of those people can go back. Really, it's building that capacity. They can go back and they can access whatever they need for whatever purposes down the road. All right. If you haven't had a chance, please continue on. Please continue to go over and add your thoughts in. Sharing is caring. Somebody might go over, see something, and they'll be able to steal it and they'll be able to build off of it or weave it into their current system. So thank you, everybody, for going over and sharing your thoughts. I'm going to hand this back now to, is it,
Julie.
Sorry, Julie. Thank you, Julie.
We're all wrapped up in that data conversation.
I know.
I see the latest comment in the chat about handout 3.2. It's actually part of the zip file. It's in the very first column of the Padlet. There's a link there to download the zip file, and that will be along with the other two handouts, as well as the slide deck. All those resources will be there for you. All right, well, we are ready to wrap up our session today. We just have a few slides to go over. And again, thank you all for your time. First, I want to thank Joe and Tacey for their time and expertise. And of course, for all of you for joining us. So we actually have a very quick survey that we're hoping that you all will be gracious enough to fill out for us. We really appreciate you spending your time with us today. And before we have to say our official goodbyes, we hope that you can take the few moments that we have before that 3:30 wrap up to complete the survey around the learning that took place here today. And we have the link to the survey dropped in the chat box. If that's easy for you, it just opens up that window on your computer and you can fill that out. Or if you prefer, you can use your smartphone and scan the QR code that appears on the slide. And again, we really do value your feedback. Many of the changes to this year's sessions came as a direct result from feedback we received last year through these surveys. So we take them very seriously and really want to make sure that these trainings are fulfilling the need that you all have in the field and the things that you're curious about. So hopefully everyone can navigate to that survey link or that QR code. And while you're doing that, we'll just review very quickly our learning goals that we introduced at the beginning of this presentation for session 3. We hope that as participants, you would understand the importance of the role of leaders in supporting effective, equitable assessment and data use, what leaders can do to cultivate and encourage a culture of effective data use, and how to explore data in partnership with various educational partners. I think that's really come through today, especially in some of the examples that we've had, both from our presenters as well as all of you. And for our success criteria for this session, you should now be able to identify key practices that you can employ in your own context to lead a culture of effective data use. So again, we want to thank you all for your time and attention today, your thoughtful engagement in our chats. And we really encourage you to take those surveys. They're very brief, and hope that we can take your feedback and make continuous improvements to these sessions. Thank you so much.